Well, good morning and afternoon to some of you. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We'll be talking about how to future-proof your business for the battleground of customer experience. And who better to talk about that than Chris Snook. And Chris is most recently the author of Digital Sense, which for some of you, we're giving away about 5 of those books. So we'll be sending that out
Awesome.
in the next couple of days. Yeah. So Chris is an award-winning entrepreneur and then author, as I mentioned, and venture catalyst, and also the executive brand humanizer here at Tallwave. So glad to
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's exciting. So today we'll be kind of talking about what customer experience is and why it's so crucial to business today. What the difference is between customer experience and the customer journey, because often those two terms get kind of confused, and then how to solve some of the moment-by-moment problems. And then, as usual, this is a very interactive webinar, so if you've got any questions, please feel free to post those in the chat. Yeah, definitely. So first off, did I miss anything on your bio? Anything you want to?
No, my bio's pretty straightforward. I'm just a squirrel trying to get a nut like everybody else, you know.
Yeah.
So
let's dive into it then. Can you explain a little bit about what customer experience is?
Well, I think most of the audience probably tuned in because they have a sense of what it is. I think what we've done with Digital Sense and the Experience Marketing Framework is tried to give people a common picture to work from. A lot of times when you have things that come up in business like lean, or you have customer experience, or you have agile, or these movements that happen and that kind of become the center point, a lot of different ideas of what it is take shape in the organization. And it's not necessarily wrong, but a lot of times what happens is when people come together and they try and align their team in one direction, it becomes more difficult. So, for us, customer experience is, literally the engine of your business. It's the most important asset, meaning the customer, and then how you go about delivering that across every point of the journey, both internally and externally. That creates this net effect that can be quantified as your customer experience.
Mm-hmm.
And people are winning and losing on that battleground daily. And so so we're just trying to help people have a common picture they can work with, so that they can get their teams aligned and they can march in one direction more efficiently.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what's the difference between that and customer journey?
Well, so the customer journey is part of, when you think about the customer journey, what you're thinking about is specific moments in time where someone who has a problem becomes aware of that problem, and they are technically your target, right? So if it's someone that needs a haircut, for instance, something simple that everyone can relate to, the minute I look in the mirror and I realize I need a haircut, if I'm new in town or if I'm traveling on the road and I don't know exactly where I'm going to go, and I'm like open to a new stylist or new barber, I'm going to do something, right? I'm going to become aware. And so that begins my journey of solving my problem called cut my hair. And then every step in that, from how I search and what shows up in my local or whatever, right, to the interface of finding it, pulling into the parking lot and parking my car, and then walking in and seeing what the line looks like, or is my appointment on time? And like every single touch point is all part of my journey with that brand and ultimately that stylist. And then afterwards, right, during the cut, is it comfortable, and is it a good experience? Is the person too chatty, or are they not chatty enough? So each one of those things would indicate different moments of my customer journey as it relates to solving that problem. And then after the fact, what do I come back, and is there loyalty there, or was it a one-off, and am I in your database or am I not? So each one of those things becomes part of my journey with any set brand. My net effect customer experience is different than my journey, because the journey is something I move through. My customer experience is something I live through, right? So I can move through a journey successfully, but have a crappy customer experience.
That makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I've heard you've used this analogy of like the road to Vegas.
Right.
And kind of that experience.
Yeah, like we live in Scottsdale, Phoenix area, so there's a 5-hour drive right to Vegas, and there's really only one road that gets you there. So, that's kind of like the customer journey, right? Like if you're going to go, you can go a couple ways, but once you get on the main road, like there's one road to Vegas. So once I get on my journey and I've evaluated, and now I've chosen who I'm going to transact with as a customer, I'm on one road until I choose to not transact anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my experience of that road is like the road to Vegas, like, are there rest stops when I need them? Are there, what are the things along the way, right? And so that dictates whether or not I hate that drive and never do it again and fly from now on, or whether I don't mind it and I choose to drive more often than fly just because it's enjoyable or has some other benefit, right? So,
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what is critical for business to think about, or businesses to think about, when innovating as it relates to the customer experience?
Well, Jean Bliss does a lot of work. If you haven't studied her, she's someone I would highly recommend, looking into. Customerbliss.com is her site, I believe. And, she talks about two things that we talk about a lot in our book too, which is optimizing for reliability and then innovation around your customer experience. And so the thing I would focus on first is reliability,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because unless you're a brand new startup, and even if you're a brand new startup, you can innovate to a certain degree against the customer experience, but if you're not reliable doing it, no one's going to stick. So the thing that you want to also think about, though, is that just because you're reliable on your current journey doesn't mean you can get complacent, because if you're not innovating, your customer now with one of these in their hands, in every second of every day, as their pathway to your road to Vegas, so to speak, is getting different, you have to find out what those touch points are, and you have to be there, and you have to be there reliably, and you have to be there in an engaging way. Otherwise, you're opening the door for, someone to take them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think if you're an existing business, the first thing you want to look at is, where are we reliably sound? Where's our customer experience from the service side to the front end sales side to the delivery side to the I've got a problem side? Where are we really sound? And like double down on that, make sure that that's good. And then where are the pain points that the customer has in your specific journey, right? So they may have pain points with other brands in different points of the journey, and you win there, that's fine. Where are the pain points they have with you, right? And a pain point is something that causes friction, something that slows down what would feel natural for them to do. And that's where you can start to innovate. But you want to pick like those things carefully and look at the ones that are going to have the largest delta. So in other words, if I invest X amount of money into solving the pain point around touch point 5, does that transact into, a multiplier when it comes down to the end?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you can change 5%, you can get 5% better at an early touch point and have it show up 100% more on the revenue or profit line. And so you want to optimize reliability first, and then you want to look for the pain points and prioritize the top 1 or 2 that you're going to attack this year. You maybe could get 3, but depending on budgets, most people can't attack more than 1 or 2 in a year anyway. And then you get those spinning and optimize reliability around those, and then again, much gathers more. You kind of do it all over again.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So at what point, or how does kind of purpose and vision fold into all of that?
Well, that's a great question. So I think we in the experience marketing framework, we talk purpose, people, and process, and kind of as the outer bounds of the graphic, which is shaped like a triangle. And purpose has to be what you get out of bed for, and it has to be something that everyone in your organization actually doesn't just recite, but like that it's clear to them. So a lot of times when we work with brands, we'll sit there and ask them, what is their stated or published purpose? Different than their mission statement, different than their vision statement, right? But just what's their purpose? Like, why do you get out of bed every day? At Tallwave, and I love the purpose they have is to earn the compliment of being our partner, our client's most trusted business partner, right? That's a clear call to action. Every day you have to earn a compliment. You don't get it once and then it's done. And so you have to show up in good times and bad to continue to earn that compliment. And a compliment is something that is voluntarily given. It's not something that you get just because someone's doing business with you. So I think whatever the purpose of a company is, there has to be a clear march to that. before you can really center your business around the customer. Because at the end of the day, your purpose should talk about the relationship you want to have with the customer before you talk about anything else. Right? Well, who do you exist to serve and why? Once you have that, then it's more easy to have the internal conversation around why it's important to work from a common picture strategically and set up a roadmap that puts the center of the business around the customer, so that everything from finance to, sales and marketing to back-end customer service to, the IT department that's creating all the tie-ins with your cloud system and everything else, how are they facilitating a better result for your people internally to go make the external purpose happen? So purpose is key. It's not something to take lightly at all. Yeah.
So kind of taking it down to a really rudimentary level, if you were comparing that or tying that into the road to Vegas, and if that road were a business, so and your purpose was to make it the safest drive for families or something like that, so then that would be your purpose?
Yeah, I think, again, the purpose of your trip supposedly is going to dictate what hotel you stay in, right? What car you rent or take with you, what you pack, what excursions you book, what activities you engage in or don't. So if your purpose is a bachelorette party, right, that's a whole different deal than if your purpose is a romantic weekend away with your spouse for your 20th anniversary. Right? Like, that's a whole different thing. Versus a trip to show the kids the Hoover Dam and, whatever, right? M&M World. So I think, the purpose, again, not to beat a dead horse, but getting clear on that is key. And I think a lot of times what's happened in larger companies is, because there's so many divisions, each division has a different stated purpose, or there's some disconnect between what management thinks and says the purpose is and what's on paper somewhere. And, in large companies, it's not going to necessarily be realistic to have them completely all of a sudden be able to bubble up, hey, here's our new stated purpose, right, through 14,000 layers. But what they can do is, as a division, they can say, here's why we exist. And then here's how, and we have our customer that we own. And so here's what that means. And here's how we're going to organize ourselves. In smaller middle market companies, or certainly startups, the advantage you have is that you get to dictate that. You can start there and kind of build it to suit. So your approach to getting centered in around purpose will be different depending on the size of your company. But even an individual unit inside of a team can, pick one that hopefully aligns to and should align to the corporate purpose, or you would work somewhere else. Because I don't think, people work somewhere that they can't. Hopefully they don't work somewhere that they don't agree with why you exist. So I think no matter what the point is, pick something and make sure that it aligns with putting the center your business around your customer, and then the rest of it will start to fold in place.
And you've got a couple of really great blog posts on that, and we'll link to that when we repost this webinar. But in one of them, you talk about some of these core competencies that you have to have a clear understanding of to kind of execute properly on customer experience.
Yeah.
Can you expand on those?
Yeah. So, and again, that's hearkening. We didn't invent, with Digital Sense, what we didn't try and do is come up with a whole new way to talk about customer experience from a science standpoint, right? There's some really great work out there, from Brian Solis to Gene Bliss to several folks that, that have done a lot in this area, including CXPA, which is a large certifying body that allows people to become customer experience professionals and certified in that regard. And so these 5 competencies come out of Gene's work. And what we tried to do with Digital Sense was take a look at how you blend customer experience, social business strategy, and marketing technology as an operator, right? So how do I take all this good stuff that's out there in the universe of customer experience, from the analyst firms like Forrester and Gartner and BCG and all those people to, the Genes of the world, and then how do I take that and, work that against lean or whatever business, model generation system I'm using, and how do I put all this together to operate my business? So the experience marketing framework does that. It's kind of like, here's a simple, 9-node way, we call it 3 layers and 2 loops. It's like, how with 3 layers and 2 loops can I look at my business all the way from the research and insights layer to the execution layer a strategy in between, and then how can I optimize reliability on the day-to-day while I dive deep to create the new innovations that I'm going to go invest in. And that's what the experience marketing framework does. As it relates to the 5 competencies, one is put the customer in the center as the number one asset, right? So that's a psychological mindset. Then there's, the customer of aligning one company around accountability to that. So, those are the 2 big ones, right? Because you can say the customer is my number one asset, but if marketing believes that and finance believes that, but IT doesn't give a crap, then you have a problem, right? Because you can get the resources to go invest from finance because they're bought in. So you can make the case to get the resources, which is one problem solved. But if your backbone and your IT doesn't think that that's what matters most, then you could have systems that don't talk to each other. You could have, redundancies. You could have problems where when I pick up the phone and I call customer service, like most of us do with our cable company, they can't find my record, or I can't get something simple done, right?
Yeah.
So why that breaks is because you have a company that maybe on one end and one division is totally aligned around the customer. And usually that means marketing, right? Because usually they're the ones who lead and make the promises. But where it falls apart is when you get into the minutia, all of a sudden you're trying to get something simple done and you're logging in, or security and high compliance industries face this a lot, right? Because they have more regulation, and it's even more important to get buy-in across the C-suite, because those points become major pain points, and the customer does not care. Like, the only reason they're still with you is because they haven't found another way. And the minute they find another way, they will never think of you again. And so, it becomes very important to, kind of internalize the 5 competencies. But I think that the 2 that really link them most together that I would, pay attention to are treating them as number one, and then driving one company accountability around that. So that's my thoughts on that.
And you guys have a really cool example of that in the book, about the trip to Australia and the company that kind of
Optus,
they incorporated digital or social listening.
Well, they literally had social listening to the point where Travis was on a trip and was flying out there for a conference, and
Travis is the co-op.
Yeah, and they were not only listening, but then they were able to communicate on the ground into the store, and give him basically a SIM card. The ability to communicate as soon as he hit the ground. I mean, that's a perfect example of a fully integrated team, right? An enterprise that is listening on the front end and through social and through marketing, but then has the connection with everybody from product to whatever, to then say, okay, well, we're going to hand out this product. We're going to do it at store whatever, A, B, C, and here's who that goes to. And then to circle back and say that's been completed, so that then social media could then take it another level and then promote it. Look what we just did, right? So talk about an end-to-end, it was a perfect example of people that are able to fluently talk to each other because they put the customer needs. Someone flying across from the States to Australia who is not going to be able to necessarily understand how to get a SIM card until they get there. How do they handle that? So
years later, that customer is still talking about it.
That's right. Yeah, it was in 2013. So now it's in a book. So they got some legs out of that little deal.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I was curious, for smaller teams or startups that maybe don't have massive budgets, is it possible to really get this customer experience going?
Yeah, I think, this has nothing to do with budget, right? Like, you can waste money on customer experience as easy as you can, do it guerrilla. Now, certain things, like there's certain things that become available to you, from marketing automation to business intelligence systems, to, things that do cost real money. But I think, tools don't build the house, right? Like, you still have to architect the plan. And, so if you're a startup and you're using Lean, the Lean Canvas specifically, you could easily plug Lean Canvas into the experience marketing framework. And where you would start to look at that would be in the key value drivers section of the Lean Canvas, right? There's a box that says, like, what are my key value drivers? You would marry that up to, in the experience marketing framework, where you would be at the vision layer, which is the second layer where we build strategy. And in the bottom left node, right, we're talking about touch points, which is that customer journey, the touch points along the way of my customer trying to solve their problem, right? The road to Vegas type thing. So you would say, what are my key value drivers on the road to Vegas, like on the touch points? And what you're looking for there is, who am I going to steal business from, right? Like, you're a startup, so you're disrupting something. You're trying to do something that doesn't work right now somewhere else. So you'd say, well, I can't compete with whoever the big, boy or girl is in this touch point because they've got more ad spend or they've got whatever. But where I can totally crush them is here, right? With content marketing or whatever. I can go really hard at this touch point where they fall off, and I can just win that node, and that's my value driver. And so you can pull the value driver and marry them up. So lean is a great model to build within the experience marketing framework a strategy that says, okay, I've got X amount of, because in the execution level, or at the success or vision layer, what you're doing is you're looking at the customer needs from the insights layer, and you're saying, what are my business goals for the next 12 months? So my top 3 business goals. Then you're coming down and you're going, okay, my business goals are going to match up with which touch points. Okay, those touch points are my key value drivers, a la lean, right? And then scope is, how am I going to calibrate all this to a scope that is my resource and my budgets? So that would go into your cost structures of lean. So you can marry these up, and now everyone has a common picture to go, I get it. My lean canvas looks like this, and how that translates into experience marketing is this. And you have 2 pictures, and they marry up together, and you can just move with them. So it's a great model to work in parallel with the experience marketing framework.
You kind of touched on this a little bit, but as far as kind of operationalizing this or getting it into the day-to-day, I know you've talked about kind of 3 things that that you have to evaluate: the customer, competition, and forces.
Yeah.
Can you expand on those?
Yeah, so that's good. So, insights layer is the baseline, right? So that's what we would call research, or we would call, we've all had insights, right? So most startups, or even most people operating in a bigger company, have those shower moments, I like to call it, because that's when that's the picture people think of it. Like you go, oh my God, we should do that, right? Or you walk into a competitor's store, or even maybe not a competitor. A lot of times what will happen is you'll get insights. A good friend of mine, Andrew Cates, wrote a book called Find Your Next. Another great book, just random, popped in my head to pick up at some point. Came out a couple years ago, but she looked at a model where people look across industry, right? So, for instance, Perry Farrell is one of the case studies who invented Lollapalooza. And when he invented Lollapalooza, he did not look at the music industry. He looked at NASCAR and the NFL, right? Because they put the most butts in seats. And so what you do with a lot of times is you'll get an insight, because you'll be in a retail business, and maybe you're B2B, but you'll watch a customer interacting with their phone in a retail store, and it'll click, and you'll go, oh my God, because you'll watch primary behavior, and you'll say, oh my God, we are faking, right? Like, that's what people do. Shoot, that's what I do. We need to go do X, right? So you'll have this insight, and it'll be totally unrelated to what you witnessed, but it'll cause that. What we try and do with the experience marketing framework at the insights layer is give you a way to create predictable cycles of that, right? Because you can have those all the time, but they're not necessarily predictable, and you don't have like cycles of them where you can start to move them into an operationalized, cadence, right? So at the insights layer, it's simple. You think of a triangle. At the top, you've got customer, your customer. At the bottom left, you have competition or competitors. And then at the bottom right, you have forces. One of those things you control, 2 of them you do not, right? So you control how you show up to your customer. So you start thinking about, what is my customer, right? The persona, depending on how detailed out that is or not. Some people don't have formal personas. A lot of companies do. That's a lot of the work that, Tallwave does with folks. But whether they do or don't have personas, they know who they're going after, right? They go, this is who we exist to solve for, right? So what are those 3 primary needs? Like, what are the needs they're trying to solve, with or without us? And then we look down and we say, okay, who are we competing with, indirectly and directly? Like, who's setting the expectation? And it's not about who's just solving the problem. Who's setting the expectation for how that problem gets solved? So an example here is to think about, like, Uber and Amazon have forever changed our expectation of how we want to check out. Now, most people don't check out that fluidly yet, right? You still have to whip out your credit card at a lot of places. But the reality is, we all have an experience now of not doing that. And so who is changing the way that we are accustomed to doing something, right? Because they're setting a bar as well that we're competing with, even if it's not in our space. But then who are we directly competing with? So you look at your competitors and you draw out your journey map and you go, great, where are we winning touch points and where are we getting our butts kicked? And then you look at forces and you say, okay, what macro forces, technological forces, legislative forces, who's in office forces, global geopolitical forces, price of oil, like shipping, like there's all these things, right, that can impact your business. So for instance, last year, I think it was the 6th or 7th, I can't remember, don't quote me. There's 6 shipping companies in the world. I'm gonna pick 6 because for some reason that stands out. The 6th largest shipping company, which was a Korean shipping company, literally goes bankrupt and leaves barges of stuff just out in the ocean. And this is in like last summer, right? And they go bankrupt and all their assets are frozen. And barges of product and cars and everything you can imagine coming from around the world are just left offshore, off of LA, off of every major port in North America and everywhere else. Now that's a force, right? That's something that has nothing to do with most people's business. But what it does have to do with is now there's 5 companies to ship all the goods and services that run the world. So what's going to happen to shipping prices? Like inherently, if there's 5 people doing 6 people's work, right? Price of shipping is going to go up. What is that going to do to retail in the holiday season? Right. So as you think about forces, what are the forces that can or are happening that could impact my ability because of shrunk profits or margins to go help serve my customer? More importantly, what are the forces that could happen that if I'm prepared for, but my competitor's not, give me arbitrage, give me an ability to get in front of that, right? And say, I'm going to go a little lighter with my investment for the next 6 months because there's a force that's happening that I think is going to squeeze profit and squeeze cash flows, right? Or squeeze commercial credit, whatever it may be. And so when my competitors are going full into that storm unaware, I'm going to sit back and stay liquid so that when that happens and they start to fall short on serving their customer, I can go win, right? So again, it's insight layer that lets you look at the goals of your customers and their needs, right? And you're thinking solely about them, empathizing with them. You're thinking about your competitors. You're looking at which touch points you're going to work at, and then you're going, what forces could impact my business, positively or negatively? So that when you come up to the strategy planning level, you're now going up one level and above competitors. You're now looking at the touch points in detail, right? And you're starting to pick which ones you're going to invest in. You're now matching your business goals to the customer needs and making sure they're aligned. Because you shouldn't have a business goal that doesn't align directly to one of your top 3 customer needs. Otherwise, you're never going to meet them where they want to be. And then you're scoping based on forces.
That's really cool.
So that's how you kind of use it together.
Yeah, I can imagine that level of awareness at the customer level, and then even with the forces and competition, that you could possibly even identify new business opportunities.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the point of it, right? You're trying to figure out where's the new product opportunity, where's the new service solution, because at the end of the day, what we're talking about is investment, right? Like we're investing time, people, capital, resources, a la scope. Like we're putting resources to work to make our customer experience better. And that's an investment. No matter how you look at it, that's a cost, right? So before we make that cost, we want to have a clear, simple picture to go, here's what we think is going to happen. So imagine I take that and I go, Beth, here's what I think is going to happen. And you're my VP of XYZ, right? It doesn't matter what division you're in. And you go, I don't think that force is real. We can have a debate now, right? Because we understand what we're talking about and why. So you can say, my data is showing me this. Okay, great. We take it over here and we throw it down. They go, oh, I agree with that. I agree with this. And so now what's happening is you go, okay, these are the external forces. These are the competitor touch points that we're vacant in. These are the internal areas where we need help. And as you go around the divisions, right, or if it's a startup, the table in the garage, right, boom, 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 everyone can kind of weigh in on those buckets. And now you have a common picture and everyone's going, I get it. And at the end of the day, what's in the center of that triangle every time is the customer.
That's an easy way to think about it. So
digital sense.
Yeah. So once people kind of have that, the customer experience flywheel going, how do they maintain it over the long haul?
Yeah, I mean, so when you say maintain it, you mean it's like maintaining everything else, right? It's kind of you bake in scheduled whether it's quarterly, biannual, whatever, checks and balances. So the success layer, which is the execution layer, right? That's the top level. This is what the learn, plan, do model is. You're basically doing. So you're in action, executing the plan that you came up with at the vision layer. You're learning because data is coming back to you, right? You've set up processes to give you the metrics that matter, measure what's valued versus value what's measured. And that data is telling you iterate here, right? So you're kind of going around like this, boom, 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 and you're going tactic, okay, result, iterate, tighten tactic, iterate, result, iterate, tactic, boom. You're just doing that. So you're optimizing for reliability on the execution layer. And then what's happening is you're learning because you're seeing that data. When you get like breakouts or something happens, then you can drive down and go, is this a force? Is this a new need, right? Is this a customer need that's appearing out of nowhere? Is this a macro force that's impacting this? Is this a competitive force that's impacting this? And then you can start, circling that up, right? So when you have the loop of innovation, the loop of innovation is running this way. The learn, plan, do loop of execution is running this way. And Bucky Fuller, he talked about people should never orbit or never fall in love. They should orbit in love. So if you can see my fingers like this, and the reason why is because when you orbit around each other, they can go at different speeds, right? Like if you think about a relationship in high school, we all had that relationship where like we went head over heels and we like trampled the person, right? Because they were like on the, hey, let's be friends speed, and we were like, let's get married, right? And so someone always gets trampled. Well, innovation and operations happen that way too. In a lot of businesses, people innovate, and the innovation team's like, yeah, let's do this. We're leaning, and they're going through lean, MVP, and they're spitting out all this, minimum viable product. And the ops team and everybody's going like, we have no way to operationalize that reliably. And so it either cripples the organization because now reliability goes to crap, and so they're super innovative, but their customers are pissed off. Or they're not innovating at all because they just shut stuff down, and then all the people that are innovating go, I'm not working here anymore because this stuff never sees the light of day. So the way to fix that is to not think about it as two things on one track, right? Innovation happens this way in a vertical loop. Operational reliability happens this way. And when you bubble up a data point through that learn, plan, do model that says, hey, there's something to look at, you now drive down and you go, is it a customer force? Is it a macro force? Is it a customer need? Or a competitive force, a macro force, or a customer need? Once you identify that, then you can start to design, right? You discover, you design, and you deploy. And then, so you basically discover, oh, there's something, let's design a solution for it. That makes it through, then you deploy it, you test it, and if it becomes reliable, then you implement it. So that's what it helps you kind of organize.
Is there an example of a company that maybe you could highlight that has done a really great job with customer experience?
People may disagree with me on this because I actually just was in a room and had a lot of people disagree with this, which was kind of fascinating because I love Southwest, but I understood that other people in different markets have a different experience than I do, living in the Southwest market. No pun intended, I live in Arizona, so I would use Southwest. Now, some people listening to this may say, well, I hate Southwest. That's fine. That just means that there's areas where they can obviously improve too, right? But I think they've done a lot, to show that they have a way, right? They're not a client. I've never worked with them. I'd love to, but they've done a lot to show that they really put the center of their business around the customer, and how that customer experiences things. And I think where I would specifically say that is, I had an experience over Thanksgiving where I had booked 2 flights back, and because I travel a lot for business, I'm on a list, and my wife and I, so I booked my flight separately, right? And when I booked the flight back, I've never had the same time. So like 6:50 in the morning coming home. Usually whenever I book that, and I booked 50 flights this year with them, it's like one flight. So it's going from A to B. There's not 2 flights that leave from the same airport at 6:50, if that makes sense. Right. Well, it turns out when you fly out of Boston, there is. I didn't know that. So I just booked the 6:50 flight for me, then I logged in and used points for my wife and son, and I booked the 6:50 flight for them. Needless to know, my error, the 6:50 I put them on was going through Baltimore, mine was going through Chicago. So I noticed this the day before we're leaving, right? Thanksgiving Day, I noticed this. We're leaving on Friday. So I call Thanksgiving afternoon, which is the holiday, obviously. And I'm like, I need to change my flight. Now, most people that have flown Southwest understand that there's no change fees and all that stuff, so that's not the issue. But I'm thinking this is going to be expensive because, like, I'm booking this flight now 24 hours less in advance, and it's the day after Thanksgiving, right? So this isn't going to be fun. And anyway, so the shorter version is they didn't charge me anything, right? Now, the person who got on the phone was like, I understand. And I said, it's probably my fault. I tried to fake it a little bit because I thought I was going to have to do some selling. So I was like, I think it was your system, but it may have been me. So apologize if it was. And I kind of did that thing. And she was like, no problem, sir. Let me just pull it up here. Yep, I see your wife and son are going there. So you want to be on the Baltimore one? I'm like, yes, I'd like to be on the flight with them, you know? And so they're like, okay, well, that's going to be however many points. And I didn't have that many points. And like, well, it's this much in cash. And I said, is there any way that you guys could, like, just, could you just change my flight? I really didn't understand that was the case. I've never had this happen. I've flown 50 times, and I'm like going into my sales mode. And she's like, I've already handled that, sir. Now, for me, in order for that to happen, requires several things that we've talked about today. It requires frontline training, right, that has someone on the other end empathizing with me as a customer. Mm-hmm. And that person's not a high-paid employee, right? They're a call center person. So there's a front level ground training that's happening there that is impressive because that person was able to empathize. I didn't have to do my sales pitch. She was solving it as I was going into my sales pitch because she realized that's what she would want the day after Thanksgiving. So I appreciated that. The second thing was the systems talked to each other well enough where she was able to do that with just me giving her my login, not like my birth and my date and like my blood type and then get transferred and do it all over again to another person like we've had a lot of people. So there's one phone call, one person. So their back-end systems talked, which means she had access to the data. Whatever approval she needed, she was able to get. And then to marry rewards points up with cash, up with a ticket, and put me in a new seat, right? All that happened. So to me, they're doing a great job in that way because I didn't expect to get away free. I had no issues, and it was solved in probably 20 minutes. And think about the last time you changed anything with an airline that wasn't that, bad, and did it work? And most times it didn't. Yeah. So I think they're doing a great job integrating a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. And even from a messaging standpoint, they've done a really great job of kind of integrating that humor.
Yeah, and I mean, their transparency. I think why I give them as an example is, again, love them or hate them. Think about how great of a creative choice transparency was, right? What was the customer pain? The customer pain with airlines is it's nickel and dime world, right? Mm-hmm. Fly anybody else, and you just never know what you're going to pay until you know, right? It's like flights from 209, but add a bag, bring your purse. You want to eat something, you want some water, you want to sit next to your family. Like, oh, it's 400. What? So they went, you know what? The customer pain point we're going to go after that we can solve is truth and pricing. No gimmicks. Just here's what it is. Mm-hmm. Bags fly free. Boom, boom, boom. Let's own that. Let's call that transparency. That's freaking brilliant. But then to deliver that promise requires all that work. So I think those kind of examples are great examples of someone who's going from the customer need first, making a brand promise that's really slick and creative and catchy, training it and leveraging a culture that's built on humor and built on long-term clientele and people that have worked there. That's the other thing is they've treated their employees really well, at least historically. That may be changing, I don't know. But historically, they've treated their employees really well. And so the first customer that we talk about is the people that work for you, right? So when your employees are happy, that makes a lot, that's 50% of the problem, if not more, when I get on your plane or you get on my plane, right? And when mergers went down between United and Continental, I remember what it was like when you don't treat your first customer that well, because I had a conversation with a flight attendant that was interested, leave it at that. So anyway, I think they're doing a great job, and that's a good campaign to kind of go get it. They're starting at the need, but then they're doing all the hard work to align the organization and the systems around it, and then they're working every day to keep it reliable.
Yeah.
And hopefully as they scale and they start going international, they don't lose that.
Very true. So to kind of tie things up, can you talk a little bit about your book and because it has a lot to do with what we talked about today, but kind of what people would get out of it?
Well, I think, you're going to get a lot of this out of it. I hope this illuminates it. When you read it, it's a lot more like step-by-step, here's how you can implement it. There's a lot of case studies in there. The thing we haven't talked about that's in there is we talk a lot about, once you have any system of change. Forget the experience marketing framework. One of the things we talk about in digital sense is, who do you have to be to create change anywhere, right? Because most of the people that are listening to this or want to deliver a great customer experience are doing so because that matters to them and they want to see that for their own fulfillment, but also because it gets their juices flowing.
Mm-hmm.
And the most frustrating thing is when you think you're right about something in that regard and you can't implement it, or you can't get people to do what you want, right? So one of the things that we spend all of chapter 5 going off, not as a diversion, but as a critical piece is how your mind works, how you're individually wired, in a very pragmatic way. Again, using a thing called the stick person to help you have a visual of how your mind actually organizes and moves thought into form, so that you can then say, got it. So now I know how to change something, but in order to affect that change, I've got to show up differently. So how do I make myself show up differently? And how do I get people to do things thinking it's their idea when actually it's mine? Right? So how do I get people to do what I want them to do and make them think it's their idea? And so we spend a whole chapter on that. So I think, that's kind of one of those surprise nuggets that people didn't expect to get out of it. And then there's, the back half of the book is really brilliantly organized around what does it mean to have a social business today? Because most people still think of social as social media. And, Gary Vaynerchuk always talks about social is just the current state of the internet. And, if the internet is everything and the internet is connected to everything as it will be over the next couple of years and is moving that way fast today, like, social business is just business, right? It's business in a world where everything is connected. So we talk about business as a relationship first before it's anything else. And we frame everything from how you pick your marketing technology stacks to how you monitor those things and where you can go to do those things through the lens of business is a relationship, and how do you nurture that relationship? What are the things you're going to bring to that table? And how are you going to design your ultimate marketing tech stack? How are you going to design a social business around your sales organization, your HR function, your customer experience and service function, across the board? Because technically everyone today impacts the marketing and brand at some level. Everybody that works for you, even if they're an engineer in the basement, right, is still a human being that is interacting with other human beings inside and out of that work wearing your jersey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And they all have one of these, and they all shop, and they all do stuff. And, there's just an opportunity now to both lever that, and also there's a risk, right, of how you control that and who owns what. So we go in depth on, there's a lot. I mean, it's amazing we finished the thing, because when we started out, we're like, all right, we're going to make this really simple, pragmatic book. Just helps people, get everybody on their organization more digitally aware and understand how to function in this world. And then we tackled it, and it was larger project than we thought. But, so far the reviews have been very humbling and great. And it seems like we've, achieved our goal to give somebody a tool that they can reference ongoingly that helps them put all this stuff together. So.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of accolades from some really well-known marketers.
Yeah, it's you never know, right? When you throw that stuff out, your friends will tell you, "Good job, congrats,"
Yeah.
but you always worry a little bit about it. They'll think it's too Jerry League, and fortunately, we haven't, and we felt that way about it. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm proud of it because Travis was wonderful to work with, and he's brilliant, and we complement each other well, and so I'm proud of it. But it's been nice. It's been nice to to see other people that we respect enjoy it. So.
And that book is called Digital Sense. We'll put a link to it in the recap of this webinar. So I think that does it for today's webinar. So
well, we hope you guys, I don't know if we got any questions or not, but if if you have any, feel free to tweet them at Chris J. Snook or at Tallwave, and we'll try and answer them. But thanks for tuning in, and thanks for having me. It's great.
Thanks for joining us. That was very insightful.
Awesome.